In the last lecture, we looked at the first migration scenario, adding a new class to our model. Now in this lecture, we're going to focus on another scenario, modifying an existing class. So I'm going to show you three kinds of modifications: adding a new property to a class, modifying an existing property, and deleting an existing property. So here in the course class, I'm going to add a new property called datePublished. Because we use datetime here, when we create a migration, this column in the database is going to be a required column. It's not going to be nullable, because the datetime type in C# is a structure and cannot be nullable. If we want to make this column nullable, we can use nullable datetime. So we put a question mark here and change the type of this property to nullable datetime. Now let's create a migration. So add migration. We give it a database-centric name. So add date published column to courses table. Again, look, we're working on a small change and a small migration. Do not go ahead and make 10 changes in your model and create a fat migration. You'll run into all sorts of issues and then it's hard to recover from them. So let's take a look at this migration. So here on the courses table, we create a new column called datePublished and it's of type datetime. Now let's run this migration. Update database. Beautiful. Let's take a look at our database. So here's the courses table. Let's take a look at the data. Look, we got a new column, datePublished, and it's nullable. Now let's take a look at the second modification scenario. I'm going to change this title column to name. So back in our model, here we simply rename this property using F2. So all references are automatically updated to name. Again, we create a migration. Add migration. Rename title to name in courses table. Look, when we're working with small migrations, it's much easier to come up with a meaningful name. If I try to rename this column and also add another column in this table, what name could I come up with for this migration? It would probably be like modify or change courses table. But what kind of change? We don't know. So small changes, meaningful names, better versioning, less chance for errors. Okay. Now let's take a look at the migration. Now this is an interesting one. The first line creates a new column on the courses table called name, which is a string. So in SQL Server terms, it's going to be a varchar of max. When we get to overriding conventions, I will show you how to change these default conventions and set a limit for your varchar. Also note that because in C# a string is nullable, here our column in the database is going to be nullable. But it doesn't make sense to have a course without a name. So in this case, I'm going to show you a quick way to override conventions. So here, I'm going to pass an argument here. Nullable, it's false. Now look at the second line, drop column. So the odd thing about this migration is that it creates a new column called name and drops the existing title column. If I run this migration, I'm going to lose the title or name of all courses in my database. So this is a very dangerous migration to run. That's why I always say work on small migrations. So every time you create a migration, you see what's going to happen in your database. Now, how do we resolve this? There are two techniques here. You can use the rename column method. Look at the arguments. The first one is a table, then the second is the old name, then the new name, and the fourth argument is optional. So I could say dbo.courses rename title to name, That's one way. And then I could delete these two lines here. Or we can use our SQL method. So after we add this name column, we can populate it with the value in the title column and then drop the title column. So SQL update courses set name equal to title. This is another technique. Now, before we run this migration, remember, whenever you make any changes in the up method here, make sure to double check the down method, because the down method is used for downgrading the database. Sometimes you bring the database to the latest version, but you need to downgrade to a specific version for maintenance. If you just modify the up method, but don't modify the down method, sometimes you run into problems and you cannot downgrade your database. So in this case, let's take a look at the down method. In the first line, we add a new column called title, and then we drop the name column. So here we need to do the reverse of what we did earlier. So before dropping the name column, I want to make sure that whatever we have in the name column is going to be stored in the title column. So I can simply copy this line, paste it here, and replace title with name and name with title. So we create a new column called title. We initialize it with what we currently have in the name column and then drop the name column. Also, we want to make sure that the title column is not nullable. So we go here, nullable is false. Now let's run the migration. Update database. Beautiful. Let's take a look at our database. So select all records. Okay, look. Now we got a new column called name, and we did not lose our data. The previous title, which was course 1, is now stored in the name column. And finally, let's look at the last modification scenario. I'm going to delete a property in my model. So back to the course class. I'm going to delete this property that we just created, date published, and create a migration. So add migration, delete date published column from courses table, and update database. Oops, sorry, I forgot to show you the migration code. So let's quickly take a look here. So it's a very straightforward change. It simply drops the date published column in the courses table. Now, if you look at our database, we no longer have that date published column here.